I didn't argue. I didn't explain. I didn't fight back. I let them believe I lost. Welcome to Silent Payback Story, a place where silence isn't weakness, it's strategy. This is not about shouting louder, proving yourself, or winning arguments. This is about what happens when you stop reacting and let reality do the talking. In a world addicted to noise, silence becomes invisible, and invisibility is dangerous. This story begins with someone who once believed that effort would be noticed, loyalty would be respected, and patience would be rewarded. Someone who stayed consistent, showed up quietly, and carried weight without demanding attention. But instead of recognition, they were overlooked. Instead of appreciation, they were replaced. And instead of honesty, they were underestimated. They watched silently as others took credit for work they helped build. They listened as louder voices rewrote the narrative. They noticed how quickly respect disappeared once they stopped explaining themselves. And still they said nothing. Not because they were weak, but because they were watching. Silence became their classroom. While everyone else spoke, justified, blamed, and defended, they observed patterns. Who benefited? Who disappeared when things got hard? Who smiled publicly but sabotaged privately? Silence filtered truth more clearly than words ever could. What looked like defeat was actually distance. And distance creates power. The decision to go silent didn't come from confidence. It came from exhaustion. Years of explaining intentions, defending actions, and correcting misunderstandings had drained something essential. They realized every response gave others leverage. Every explanation invited judgment. Every defense assumed guilt. So they stopped. At first, silence felt uncomfortable, almost wrong. People noticed immediately. Questions came fast. Why are you so quiet? You've changed. Is something wrong? But none of those questions came with solutions. They came because silence disrupted comfort. People had grown used to access to time, energy, ideas, emotional labor. Silence removed access. And when access is removed, entitlement panics. Some became irritated. Some became distant. Others tried provoking a response using guilt, pressure, or comparison. Silence held firm. Every ignored message strengthened a boundary. Every unanswered provocation restored control. Silence slowly stopped being external and became internal. Emotional detachment sharpened focus. Energy stopped leaking into places that never returned it. Silence didn't isolate them. It protected them. Silence doesn't change people. It reveals them. Without reactions to feed on, true intentions surfaced. Some people disappeared completely, proving they were only connected to usefulness. Others showed passive aggression. Subtle remarks designed to regain control. A few revealed insecurity masked as confidence. Watching this without reacting was difficult but educational. Silence became data. Patterns emerged clearly. Who needed validation? Who feared irrelevance? Who relied on noise to hide lack of substance? This awareness changed everything. The problem was never lack of talent or effort. The problem was proximity to people who thrived on distraction. Silence broke that proximity. It reduced emotional clutter. Conversations became intentional. Time became valuable. They stopped needing to be understood by everyone. Alignment mattered more than approval. And alignment builds momentum. Momentum builds fastest when no one is watching. Without an audience, pressure disappears. Performance ends. Real work begins. They invested quietly. Skills that compound. Knowledge that doesn't expire. Habits that strengthen foundations. They stopped chasing recognition and focused on effectiveness. They removed themselves from environments driven by gossip, comparison, and validation. Instead, they entered spaces where outcomes mattered more than opinions. Silence sharpened discipline. Routines tightened. Standards rose. They became selective with time, people, commitments. No announcements. No updates. No promises. Just execution. Confidence returned. Not loud, not arrogant, but grounded. Silence wasn't hiding them. It was preparing them. The most dangerous phase is when people underestimate someone who has stopped explaining themselves. Comfort breeds carelessness. Assumptions replace awareness. They believed the silence meant decline, failure, irrelevance. They moved freely, unaware they were being observed. Meanwhile, positioning was happening quietly. The silent one stopped competing in noisy spaces and chose arenas designed for results. Preparation met patience. When readiness meets opportunity, it looks effortless to outsiders. But effortlessness is earned privately. Silence allowed growth without exposure, protection without interference. And soon that growth would become impossible to ignore. There comes a moment when silence stops being emotional and becomes strategic. That moment arrived quietly, without celebration or certainty, but with a deep internal shift. Silence was no longer something that happened because of exhaustion, it was chosen because it worked. Every interaction now followed a simple rule. If it didn't move life forward, it didn't deserve a response. Arguments lost their appeal. Explanations lost their urgency. Opinions lost their power. Silence simplified everything. With fewer distractions, thinking became clearer. Decisions became sharper. Priorities rearranged themselves naturally. Instead of reacting to situations, they started designing outcomes. Silence created space to think long-term instead of emotionally. It allowed mistakes to be corrected privately, without embarrassment. It allowed learning to happen without pressure. Most importantly, it restored ownership over direction. For the first time in a long time, life wasn't being shaped by other people's expectations. Silence became structure, and structure creates stability. While others remained busy maintaining appearances, this person was building systems. Systems that didn't rely on approval. Systems that functioned quietly, consistently, and independently. Silence had turned from protection into propulsion. As growth accelerated, something interesting happened. Confidence returned, but in a different form. Not the loud, performative confidence that seeks validation. This was calm confidence. The kind that doesn't rush. The kind that doesn't explain. The kind that doesn't need to be seen to be real. Silence taught patience. Not passive waiting, but disciplined restraint. The ability to wait without anxiety. To prepare without pressure. To trust timing without forcing outcomes. While others chased immediate wins, this person invested in foundations. While others argued over recognition, they focused on competence. Silence made room for intuition. Without constant noise, instincts sharpened. Decisions felt aligned instead of rushed. There was no need to announce progress or prove momentum. Progress spoke through consistency, and consistency compounds quietly. The version of themselves that once felt overlooked was now evolving into someone self-directed, self-assured, and unbothered. Silence wasn't isolating, it was empowering. It filtered distractions and amplified focus. And focus, sustained long enough, creates results that don't need explanation. Eventually, the absence became noticeable, not through statements but through impact. People began sensing something had changed, not because they were told, but because expectations were no longer being met. Availability disappeared. Predictability vanished. Silence broke patterns people relied on. That disruption created uncertainty, and uncertainty unsettles those who depend on control. Speculation filled the gap. Some assumed withdrawal. Others assumed failure. A few sensed growth but couldn't confirm it. Silence allowed all interpretations to exist without correction. That was intentional, because clarity wasn't owed to anyone anymore. While assumptions circulated, execution continued. Plans matured without interference. Decisions were tested without resistance. Growth happened without exposure. Silence functioned as camouflage. By the time curiosity turned into concern, momentum had already passed the point of interruption. Silence had shielded progress until it became irreversible. The breakthrough didn't arrive dramatically. It arrived decisively. Opportunity appeared, not by chance but by alignment. When preparation meets timing, hesitation disappears. Action felt natural. To outsiders, the shift looked sudden, unexpected, almost unfair. But nothing about it was sudden. Silence had compressed years of effort into a moment. Presence carried weight now. Decisions influenced outcomes. Absence created gaps others couldn't fill. The narrative changed instantly. People revisited old assumptions, replayed conversations, reinterpreted silence. Understanding arrived late but clear. The person they underestimated had outgrown the environment entirely. There was no confrontation, no announcement, no explanation. Results had spoken. And results don't argue. They simply exist. This is the truth about silent payback. It doesn't feel like revenge. Feels like alignment. Like finally standing in a position that doesn't require justification. The people who underestimated them weren't defeated, they were left behind. Silence removed emotional dependency. It removed the need to be understood by those committed to misunderstanding. It eliminated the urge to prove anything. And in that elimination, power emerged. Real power. The kind that doesn't argue, doesn't explain, and doesn't look back. Silence wasn't empty, it was disciplined. It wasn't weakness, it was restraint. And restraint, paired with preparation, becomes dominance. The silence that once made them invisible had made them untouchable. And once someone experiences that level of control, they never return to noise again. This wasn't the end of the story. It was confirmation that silence works and always will.